Hello?
Good morning. Welcome back to the second day of our conference. I hope you're all well rested and had an enjoyable evening last night. We're very happy to have you all back here for another, let's say, half day of interesting discussions and conversations. Hopefully also allowing for more interaction in the parallel session. I realized that many people felt a need to express themselves and engage in conversations. So the parallel sessions today will allow for more time to do that. Unfortunately, I have to make one announcement. The Czech Minister of Labor and Social Affairs, Michaela Marksová, just canceled. She is unfortunately unable to come because of another very urgent appointment. You know, these things happen with busy politicians. Yet another opportunity as an outcome of this conference to raise our voice and make, hopefully, the Czech government realize how important the ratification and implementation of the Istanbul Convention and programs against violence against women are. So unfortunately, Michaela Marksová, who's been a long-term gender activist, will not join us today, or will hopefully, if she finds some time during her schedule, she may join us for the closing, but we're not sure if that will happen. So, exactly, that's what I'm going to talk about. I will guide you quickly through the day, through the morning, in fact. There are in total four sessions, 2 parallel in each time slot. And one of the sessions always will take place here in the plenary, and another session will take place upstairs in Salon 3, which is attached to the room, to the breakfast room. You will find it, for those who would like to participate in that session, you will find it as if you're walking into or next to the breakfast room. Session 1 will be upstairs, which is the session on preventing gender-based violence, good practice examples. The session moderated by Marianne Hester, upstairs in room number 3. And for the second time slot, session number 4, which is the session on institutional and policy frameworks for addressing gender-based violence, the session moderated by Laura Albu will also happen upstairs in Salon number 3. As I said before, in each time slot, 2 sessions will run in parallel, and the coffee break is in between. Between the sessions, there is no moment of gathering here. So from your sessions, you will go immediately to the coffee break down here, and then walk into your second parallel session. No plenary in between. And we will all resume after the parallel sessions at 12:15, 12:15, we will all resume here for the closing plenary. And I hope to see you all there then again. And I wish you enjoyable and fruitful discussions in the parallel sessions. Again, session 1 and session 4 will go upstairs. Thank you very much. Have interesting discussions in your sessions.
talk about presentation. Shall I switch the slides for you, or do you want me to transfer computer here?
I think
It's better. Okay.
thank you. No, I don't have problem. Okay. So I'm going to start with an introductory.
No, já už jsem tady přepla jejich prezentace. No to je ten Okay, so you can use F5 to screen the presentation on the screen here.
Okay.
Yeah, and then escape for back. And I don't know if somebody else has a presentation you don't have.
Vlad, did you have a PowerPoint or not? No. Ursula said maybe she has one, but she mightn't use it. So. Do you want me? Oh, so sorry.
Then we have a nice
And neither does Vlad. Ursula, I asked her.
last try. Both so serious and we
Send them to us now. Send us the
Yes,
photos.
yes, sure, I will.
Okay, 10:30. Good morning. I hope that all the people who are now in this room are the people who want to attend the session on protecting victims' best practices. Is that correct? You're all where you should be. Well done. I am Masli Naudi. I'm not going to introduce myself in any length because you have it all written up on that little book that you were given when you registered. I'm going to start, however, by giving a short presentation on the topic, just to introduce the topic of protection and support. And then we have our panel speakers who are going to speak about good practices in their countries or in their localities. So, the first thing that I would like to stress is that as we negotiate and as we deal and as we worry and put pressure and word things in a particular way or in another way, the most important thing for me is to remember what this is about. So it's not only a groundbreaking, legally binding, seriously good convention, but it is about the women. And one thing that I always felt very strongly, even when I was part of Kavya, so I was negotiating the convention. One thing which I felt very strongly was the responsibility that this convention is going to affect the lives of not just 200,000 women in Malta. I am from Malta. Malta is very small. but millions of women all over Europe. So we need to keep in mind what this is about. It is about the women, it is about the victims of violence against women and domestic violence, the children and other people who sometimes also are victims, and so keep that centrally, centrally in our discussions, in our work. So in fact, the Istanbul Convention dedicates a whole chapter to protection and support. And it's important to note that protection and support go together. So we're not just talking about protection orders, which are very important, of course, and general police protection or whatever. These are all very important things, but we're also talking about support. So we're also talking about the women's shelters and other centers and agencies, NGOs, organizations that help the victims get back on their feet. And if we didn't have this support, then just protection orders and just the court would not be sufficient, because if the women, when a woman leaves an abusive relationship, that is just the first step on a long journey. When she leaves, it's a very important first step, but then if she doesn't find the support that she needs, so many women end up going back into their abusive relationships because they feel they have no other options. So protection and support. The start of the chapter, as in all the other chapter, always has all of these sort of general obligations, which I'm sure you can actually read for yourself. But they include effective cooperation between all relevant state agencies, including judiciary, public prosecutors, law enforcement, and NGOs and other relevant entities, which are very important. And the chapter includes both the short-term measures and the longer-term measures of protection and support. So information which is adequate, information that they needed, and in a language that they can understand. And by just mean, is it in Czech, English? Is it also in words presented in a way that makes sense for them and gives us the number of shelters that should be available per population? And not only that there should be sufficient of them, but that they should be accessible. So it's not enough, nothing else in all of the rest of the rural area. So they have to be both sufficient and accessible. They ask for telephone helplines, which are statewide, which are 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and free of charge. I remember fighting for this in the Cavio, because some delegations were saying, oh, but if they're free of charge, then there will be a lot of prank calls and people, you know, will make stupid calls and whatever. And I remember fighting very hard and saying, yes, but if you are a woman who has left home, as I remember one woman left home wearing a t-shirt and a pair of knickers and nothing else, barefoot, no money in her hand, no nothing. She just ran out of home to save her life. What would she do if we didn't have free phone calls? So this is what the convention asks as a minimum. Appropriate, easily accessible rape crisis centers. So rape or sexual assault crisis centers where a woman can go to one place and have all her needs seen to. It also asks for legal and psychological counseling, and this is both short-term and longer-term, in the sense that women need help when they are precisely in the trauma, but then women need help for a longer period afterwards. Not only women, children, and possibly other victims as well. So they need help there. And access to healthcare and social services. Again, immediate healthcare, but also longer-term healthcare. Immediate emergency social services, but also longer-term help in that regard. So this is what I call the recovery services which are required. So they are legal and psychological counseling. As I said in the previous slide, that can be both immediate, but it also needs to be ongoing for a while. Financial assistance, housing, education and training, assistance in finding employment. If you have left a home which, although it was violent, it had a bedroom for each of your children, and your children had all sorts of gadgets that children have nowadays. I cannot keep up with the different gadgets of children nowadays, but you know what I mean. And you leave that home and you go to a shelter, and then you get no help to reinstate yourself somewhere else. You don't get help with housing, to find housing. You don't get help to maybe train. Maybe you haven't worked in a while because you've been financially dependent on your partner, to train, to enter new employment, etc. Many women will go back. They will go back because they say, look what I am doing, this was a terrible mistake, look at my poor children, what I am putting them through. Before they were comfortable. It's true, there was violence, but they had their own rooms and they had their own things, and now they don't. So they need the longer term services as well. Also, professionals need to be trained, and we're going to talk about this thing. We need specialized services. We need services for everybody, but then we also need specialized services for women and their children. These services need to be adequately resourced, and I know that this is the point that most of our countries are going to fail in, and we need to push so hard for this, adequately resourced. It's no good having these services and then just watching them fail because they are not adequately resourced. They need to be adequately resourced. The rights and needs of child witnesses are emphasized within the convention. Third-party reporting is encouraged. This is also very important, that it's encouraging us to report not only if it's encouraging me to report not only if I am the abused person, but also if I know that my daughter or my mother or my sister or my cousin or my friend is living in that sort of situation. And also, it suggests that professionals should not be stopped from reporting by confidentiality rules. That is, that with certain provisos, which are in the convention, we should allow, if a doctor has a patient who has been through serious violence and who he believes is very likely to experience further violence, that he should be allowed to report. For example, I'm using the doctor just as an example, but the various professionals. Okay. Yes, I did it right. Okay. Just a very quick, that was just a very quick introduction. We now have our three speakers. I am also, with your permission, three speakers. Not going to introduce them at any length because you have it all written in the book. You also have pretty photos of them. So in case you forget their names, you can look at their photos and say, oh yes, that was that one. And I would rather use the time listening to what they have to say in terms of good practices, and then having a discussion. So we're going to start with a round, so to speak, from the panelists, maybe about 10 minutes each, talking about good practices in their countries. And then we'll take it from there. We'll take some questions from the floor and so on. Thank you. So the first on my list is Meta.
Thank you, Marceline. Good morning, everyone. I come from a Lithuania-based NGO, a Human Rights Monitoring Institute, which is also an operator of the NGO program in Lithuania, funded under the Norway and EEA grants. We are an advocacy group, and I can't compare with my fellow panelists in terms of experience of working directly with victims. But I'll try to do my best to introduce the latest developments in Lithuania in terms of response to gender-based violence. And I'll try to keep it brief to leave enough time for discussions. And I will focus more on domestic violence because I think we made a better progress there compared with response to manifestation of other gender-based crimes. So for the start, I would like to quote our Deputy Police Commissioner, who said that the Lithuanian law on protection against domestic violence is one of the top 5 laws ever adopted in the country. I think that says quite a lot about the position the police were in when they didn't have adequate legal tools and measures to deal with this crime. And with this law, all forms of domestic violence were effectively criminalized. So there is only public prosecution of all domestic violence cases, including psychological violence and sexual violence, and the victim has no legal obligation to submit a complaint. So the investigation must continue even when the victim might want to terminate the proceedings, unless the victim and the perpetrator reconcile and the perpetrator is released from criminal liability under certain conditions that he obviously cannot break. So if there are repeated acts of violence, the case would definitely go straight to the court and the penalties will be more severe. In terms of protection measures, the law provides for urgent measures that the police take on the scene to ensure the immediate safety of the victims. Usually it's arrest up to 48 hours and long-term protection measures that are applied by the court. There are 2 protection measures, they have to be applied together. It's obligation to reside separately, so that means that the perpetrator has to move out of the place of residence, and obligation of no contact. So these are all measures applied in criminal proceedings. There are no civil protection orders. And there is a discussion around these protection measures because the law says that they have to be applied by default in each case of domestic violence. So there is a discussion on 2 points, whether we should introduce alternatives like civil protection orders, because current legal framework is not entirely in line with Istanbul Convention that requires protection measures to be independent of any legal proceedings. And another point is proportionality of the measures. But the impact of this law was huge. It came into force in late 2012 and it changed the landscape completely in terms of investigation and prosecution for this crime, because if in 2011 we had 1,500 criminal investigations, it's for the population of 3 million. So in 2014, we already had more than 10,300 investigations into various forms of domestic violence, physical violence, of course, being the top form of the violence prosecuted. 82% of victims are women, 10% are men, and 8% are children. And this statistics remains constant each year. And as you notice from the statistics, the law is gender neutral. It applies to everyone. It, of course, applies to same-sex couples as well. So under the law, every domestic violence victim has the right to free, specialized, integrated support. There is a partially state-funded network of specialized support centers that was established by using the existing victim support NGOs and giving them the status of official service providers. I'm not going to talk about the amount of state funding allocated because I'm supposed to focus on good things, but I still would like to draw the attention that the funding is still very poor. There is a rather strict referral system in place. At first it was a model of informed consent where the police would still request some written consent from the victim to have her contact details passed on to the support centers, but the support services were definitely not happy with that because the referral rates were poor, and they provided services to too few victims compared with the increasing numbers of criminal investigations. So this referral mechanism was changed last year, and now there is no need for written consent, and every case must be referred to specialized support center, only notifying the victim that the center will call her and offer support. So I think this stricter approach works well in Lithuania, because one of our surveys showed that women indeed lacked information on the available support services, and the most satisfied with the services were the ones who were contacted by the center and offered support. So, and the specialized support centers are supposed to provide at least helpline services 24/7. So domestic violence crime now comprises around 10% of all crimes annually. And there are at least 50,000 call-outs to domestic incidents each year, and that means that every police patrol officer must be able to recognize from all those incidents domestic violence cases. And the biggest challenge is, of course, how to train and introduce good practices into police work. And the police department, they now have a joint project with Norwegian police, where the purpose is to prepare 30 police instructors who later train another 500 police patrol officers. So they are also working on recommendations and methodical guides, and will be producing visual material to instruct on behavior on the scene, especially with regards to the treatment of victims. And this is not just something like entirely new in Lithuania. There have been quite a few trainings before, but I think now it's on a larger scale. And another important outcome of this cooperation will be a technical alarm system with alarm buttons that domestic violence victims will be equipped with by the end of 2016. And this will help the police to monitor the violation of the court orders that still happens quite frequently. So this conventional training is, of course, the best way to develop skills and competences. But in Lithuania, we have high rates of rotation among police officers, and those who are trained on domestic violence, then they move to investigate other crimes, and not all police officers can be reached with conventional training, especially in the regions. So at Human Rights Monitoring Institute, we came up with this idea to use online learning as a solution for providing basic education on domestic and gender-based violence. So now we are developing an online learning platform that is based on 3 pillars. It's visual materials, video lectures from the experts, and situational videos, then complementary reading materials, and self-assessment tools, basically knowledge tests. So it's still under development, and I can't demonstrate it yet, but what we want to achieve that each officer or any other practitioner who is likely to encounter domestic violence or gender-based violence victim in their work, they have at least basic knowledge and understanding how to respond. So in the course modules, we will focus heavily on the needs of the victims in the proceedings, the way they should be treated, and the nature of gender-based crimes and why they require a different response than other crimes. So as I mentioned, we want to target not only police officers, but also prosecutors, judges, lawyers, healthcare professionals, and other practitioners who now receive very little or no training on domestic or gender-based violence. Then there are several other initiatives that are related with all victims of crime, but they will have a very positive impact on the rights of domestic and gender-based violence victims as well. One is the so-called IBPIS system. It's a Lithuanian acronym. So basically what it does, it moves all criminal procedure to digital space, so no paper files anymore. And the systems of all agencies will be integrated to increase cooperation, to make it easier to exchange data. And it's been under development since 2010, and it should be launched soon, and it will have a window for the victims as well. So the victim will have access to information on criminal investigation, the main decisions, other basic procedural documents. She will be able to submit and receive documents and sign them, submit complaints, and so on. And I think it is especially important to the victims of domestic and gender-based violence because unfortunately most of the police officers are still very poorly adjusted to the needs, and unfortunately interactions with police are not always a pleasant experience. And I think what's most important is that the privacy can be better protected, because from our surveys we see that sometimes violation of privacy, it can be even more traumatizing than the experience of violence itself. Because sometimes it happens that the woman comes to the police office, she has to stand in the same line with other victims, and then maybe some police officer will say, so who is here with domestic violence? And this can be a very traumatizing experience, yes. And I will end with just several good practice examples from the courts. So the courts have launched a virtual courtroom, which provides victims with step-by-step information on the court proceedings and hearings. And the courts are also setting up volunteering services to provide support to victims before and during the court hearings. So it is especially important to domestic violence and gender-based violence victims, because specialized support centers don't offer such service at the moment. And with the new law, many more cases of domestic violence started reaching the courts, because before that only very few would go to the court, and now from 7 up to 20% of the cases that the courts are dealing with are domestic violence cases. And from our surveys, when we interview judges and the prosecutors, one of the top issues was identified that the victims don't receive enough support in the court proceedings. So what the judges see when they come into the courtroom is the same imbalance of power, that the victim is standing somewhere quietly in the corner, all afraid, not knowing what to do, and the perpetrator is usually very confident, he's very innocent, and he has a lawyer who tells him, advises him, and so on. So the courts themselves, they want to see the proceedings more balanced and the victim needs better protected. So I think that's it for this brief overview, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, good morning. I will try to keep it brief in order to provide you with more space for questions for the discussion. My name is Vladimír Vedra and I'm local. I come from the Czech Republic, and I would like to focus on some examples of good practices with our experience. I will not go deep into the system of the Czech law, but just to mention a few milestones that brought us to the state of play we have today. In 2004, there was actually the first initial law on domestic violence that brought a specialized criminal punishment for perpetrators. It's usually the case that the criminal law acts as first. And in 2007, we adopted the model you may perhaps know as the Austrian model, which is based on eviction of the perpetrator as a police measure in combination with civil protection, civil courts protection, and establishment, and it was a very important step, establishment of intervention centers as specialized services for victims of domestic violence. And also this law brought the system of cooperation between those stakeholders. Since 2004 or 5, we have some experience with the topic I would like to focus on in my contribution, which is specialization of professionals on domestic violence. And I don't mean services for victims in terms of NGO providers, but the professionals as police officers. My own background is also, I'm a police officer, but I also have experience with direct contact with victims as a member of NGO. So sometimes I see both views, both ends. And I was very happy to be there when the first unit for domestic violence, the police unit, was established in Brno in 2005. And as you may see, it's 10 years, since then, and we were hoping at the time that this experience, which showed up to be a really good one and with good results and as a good example of approach to victims, supporting kind of approach of especially trained police officers. And we were hoping this new model will spread throughout the country throughout the years. And I was personally quite surprised it was not the case. It was a local project, and it stayed a local project until today. Of course, not the only one. There are many local projects like this one in other cities, in Ostrava, for example. But each of them is a little bit different. There are slightly different those kind of models. But what we miss is some general approach and taking advantage of the experience that was found within those projects. And this brought the intervention centers, which are gathered in the Association of Intervention Centers, to the idea of perhaps pushing a little bit the authorities in a way that perhaps these models can be used as a good practice, not just locally, but on the country level. And that's why we applied for a grant, and I'm very happy to say Open Society Fund through the Norwegian funds was kind enough to support this project. And the major aspect of this project is to bring specialization of professionals on domestic violence in the Czech Republic, in the system of the Czech Republic, support to victims of domestic violence. And the reason for this is perhaps, and I believe I'm not the only one with this experience, that no matter what the system is in various countries, what really matters is attitude of a specific professional who deals with the victim. No matter whether it's a police officer or a judge or child protection authority, what really matters is how this person who represents the state, the state authority, how this person deals with the case. And we found that the way how to improve the practice is to establish professionals who deal with these cases on daily basis. As I said, we have a good experience we can use as a model, perhaps. There may be more models. We are currently working on the overview of possible solutions of this specialization, and we cooperate with authorities throughout the country, and we are very happy to have some of the best experts on our side. So let's hope this will finally, I'm not hoping that within this project we will reach the final step and implement the specialization in the whole country, but I hope this will start perhaps the discussion, and I believe this will be the way how to substantially improve the reaction of state authorities to domestic violence. It was, in fact, one of the points Marceline made in her presentation, that professionals need to be trained. But we faced exactly the same problem, as Meta mentioned, that professionals, they have many variety of different tasks, and domestic violence is just one of them. But it's a specific problem, and we need to use specific tools to deal with the problem. But sometimes the professionals, if they are not really specially trained for domestic violence, they don't realize that, which is the reason why we want to have special professionals for domestic violence cases. So that was the basic idea. I promised to be brief, so perhaps I will be happy to answer your questions later. Thank you.
Can I have one hand? Ursula takes the other. So Ursula now, yes, thank you.
So now I will speak about situation in Poland. So I would like also to introduce you a little bit to the Polish legal and institutional framework to combat only actually domestic violence, because we don't have the comprehensive system as requested in the convention to prevent and combat all forms of violence. This is something which is definitively missing, and I hope that after the ratification convention, our government will start to also think about this way to have a comprehensive program to combat all forms of violence against women. So our domestic violence legal framework was introduced by the law which was adopted by the Polish Parliament in 2005 and then amended in 2010. And we are still missing some of the legal measures which would help professionals to more adequately protect the victims of domestic violence. And our law, of course, is gender neutral, and women's organizations were fighting to introduce to the law at least into the preamble mentioning about the real roots and causes of domestic violence, but we were not unfortunately successful. And we are not also very successful in introducing some of the legal measures to protect women victims of domestic violence, such as the order giving the power to the police to expel the perpetrator. We still don't have that, and this is something which we should, according to the convention we recently ratified. So I hope it will be the measure which will be introduced very soon. And we also miss very effective civil remedies, although we have in our law provision which says that women are victims of domestic violence can apply to the civil court for the expelling order. But this is not really effective, and this is not really very fast track for women if they don't want to go through the criminal procedure. Because the court in theory has the 1 month to decide, and in practice very often it lasts very long before the court make any decision. So this is not an effective tool to protect women against the perpetrator, and this is not also combined with the measure which will allow courts to have the order not non-contact order. So this is only expelling order. And as concerned the criminal procedure, our law now allows the prosecutor to issue the also expel order and non-contact order. But these measures are not unfortunately used in many cases, although there is a progress in last years and the prosecutors more and more use this measure, but still in many cases they are not used when this is needed, and of course that's I think also the result of the lack of knowledge of professionals and prosecutors and also policemen, because also we don't have like in Czech Republic the professional teams in criminal justice system among policemen and prosecutors. Also, this was also one of the things we're advocating for many years, to have specialized units in the police and in prosecution to deal with violence against women cases or domestic violence cases. Also, we have the institutional system based on the concept that all institutions should cooperate, and this is very rather bureaucratic system, which mandates the several institutions which are not really specialized in domestic violence to cooperate in a manner which is very strictly described in the executive law issued by the Ministry of Labor. So the system of so-called blue card mandates the police, social services, medical professionals, also the teachers and probation officers to cooperate, and they are also mandated to in case of domestic violence, to fill the so-called blue card to register the case in the system. And then they were supposed to send this information to the local coordinator of the interagency teams, which usually meet once a month, and then discuss the case, and usually set up a group, working group, or they deal with the individual case themselves as a big group. And this, as a Women's Rights Center and several other organizations, they were quite critical about this system because it's rather bureaucratic and it's not very effective because it takes time before the group meets, and also we don't think it's necessary in all cases to set up a big group to discuss the case. And that is something also we are critical about, that these groups may, without victims' consent, share the information about her sensitive data, including her health, for example, and addictions. So I think that could be, and it is in many cases, quite dangerous, and could lead into the victimization of victims, because I think many of these professionals are not really well prepared to work, and they are not enough sensitive, and still they, in their work, they are in many situations use a very stereotypical way of looking at a victim's behavior. So if victims is, for example, addicted to alcohol or drugs, so that's, she may be a very suspicious victim, so which some professionals may say that as she's drinking or abusing alcohol, so, and they don't take into consideration that it's maybe the effect of domestic violence, for example. So they see her as like a second category of victims which may be responsible for what's happened to her. So we don't like, and we were fighting against that, but unfortunately this is in the system. And also the domestic violence law is not necessarily well combined with the criminal system, because also the definition of domestic violence, which is in the law, is not very well referring to the criminal provisions. And also this definition is not fully in compliance with the definition which is under the convention. And also sometimes it's when it is used by professionals intervening in domestic violence cases, this may be used against women. Because, for example, if women escape from house and they are not living together, because the definition says that to recognize this as a domestic violence, a couple should live together or have the same household. So if women escape and live in the shelter or somewhere else, so very often the professionals, they stop this blue card procedure because there is no danger. They are not living together, so we have nothing to do in this case. So we hope that this system will be amended to really provide better legal measures to help more effectively women who are victims of domestic violence, and also to notice this gender aspect, which is very much missing in Polish system. As concerns institutional framework, we have most of the places where women can find help and assistance are not really specialized in domestic violence cases. Under the domestic violence law, we have 35 so-called specialized centers where women can get professional assistance and also shelter, but they are they are not sufficient, and most of the places where women go are not really specialized. We have this also crisis intervention centers, but they are not really, not all of them are specialized, and generally they are supposed to help all people in various crisis situations. So we still are missing this also, and have to look into our system to base it more on the professional and specialized services. I would like at the end, because Marceline is giving me the time limit, so I have to hurry up with my presentations. I would like to mention our recent project which we started thanks to the Daphne program and partners from a few of the European countries to introduce the model of family justice centers, which were mentioned yesterday, which means that all professionals are working under one roof. And we started this cooperation last year in 2014 by signing cooperation with Metropolitan Police in Warsaw. And we have twice a week now policemen who are at our center, and they meet with women, and they can start, for example, this blue card procedure. They can start the criminal investigation. We are not fully satisfied with that system yet, because every week we have different policemen, not the same one, because they are sent from different districts. But still, this is a very good, I think, model to start to look into it, because our clients are very happy to have policemen at one place. We also cooperate with prosecution and one hospital. They are not, unfortunately, yet under one roof, because I think we need also bigger space to accommodate other partners. But we see this as a kind of a future framework we would like to promote in Poland, and this is very effective, and our clients very much like this. And this is also kind of ongoing training for policemen when we work with them and exchange sometimes information and persuade them that this case really needs their attention. And also the important that we try, and this was also the lesson for us, because before, after we started to ask also women what is their perspective and what they need, because sometimes I think also we, as a provider of services, forget about that, and we think that we know better. As this interagency cooperation was very much promoted in Poland, and also we think that this is very important. But normally people don't ask victims if they really like this, to share also information. And some victims told our clients, told us, oh, they tell their information to one professional. I don't necessarily like this information to be shared. So we introduce now the system that they have to consent for all sharing information also about one at our center. So I think this is very important also in empowering women. So we have to take that also into consideration. So I strongly recommend this under one roof services project, and I think it's also very important to have women-only services, and this is also not the case in Poland, and we try to keep this standard at our center. Also at the beginning the police also was not very happy about it, and they thought that men also should have the access to services. But from our clients we heard that this is very important for them to have only women place, because they feel safer, and they also can avoid sometimes the double victimization from perpetrator, which may come to the center, general center. And we have such cases that perpetrator are looking also for help, presenting themselves as victims as well, and they come into the same center as women. So they may have women may have problem being also victimized, and some professionals, which may be not real professional, may start to have some doubts and not trust women. And this is very important to build this trust with women to help her successfully. And also it's important to give women voice, to be able to work and to have the impact on the services. So we now introduce the system that we from time to time ask our clients and give them the space to organize themselves with us. And many of our clients also help other women to go, for example, to the court. And this is a very helpful also practice. I think if we have many volunteers and professionals who are assisting women, because very often, as it was mentioned by someone before me, women are quite alone, and this is really, there is lack of equality in courts where men have the professional lawyer and women are just on their own and may be victimized before even the courtroom or in the court. So we also try to send in most of the cases someone to assist women, and we see also that change a lot of attitude also of courts when our representative is helping women and it's in the courtroom. So I think that's my time is over. Thank you.
Thank you, Ursula. Thank you, Vladi. Thank you, Meta. We now have questions from the floor. We have a nice almost half hour. We have a question there, but we don't have someone running around. Yes, we do. Okay. Are there any other questions that would... Yeah.
Thank you. I'm Olga Petruchova from Slovakia. I have two basic questions. First is a general one, because we are talking here about domestic violence, but gender-based violence is broader than only domestic violence, even if in our maybe region domestic violence is a more significant part of gender-based violence. Still there is a wide scope, particularly sexual violence, which occurs not only in closed intimate relationship. So my question would be if you have any extra measures for tackling sexual violence, maybe out of intimate partnership. And the second question would be, at the very beginning, spoke about Istanbul Convention and about third party referring on the cases domestic violence. And my question or input in the discussion is what we see in Slovakia. On the one side, of course, we want to encourage public and everybody to report. But reporting the case without the victim, without the woman knowing about it, it's going to be reported, it's somehow counterproductive, because the victim needs to be prepared, she needs to have a safe place and safety plan, etc., etc. And it happened in Slovakia that suddenly police occurs at the door, and a victim doesn't know about it, and then it just rise more and more problems. So my question is, how do you deal with these cases? Thank you.
Thank you, Olga. Are there any other questions? Shall we take another question and then we'll reply? Is that okay? Yeah.
I think you said, the Czech representative said something very important. You said, let me quote you correctly, what really matters is the attitude of the state representative in the face of the victim. And we heard quite a bit about the importance of training, but training and changing attitudes are not necessarily the same. So I would like to invite you to reflect a little bit more about this. Where do they go together? Where do they not go together? And how can we, in fact, influence attitudes beyond what is needed in terms of training?
Anybody else who would like to raise a question from the floor? No. So let's go with this. Because I have the microphone in my hand, and because I'm the chair, I'm going to abuse my position by answering you, which was the last question, and then you may also answer her, of course. One of the things which I have always really strongly worked on is attitudes. I am a lecturer and I lecture social work mainly, but I lecture social work students a lot, and then I have a few hours for law students, and I have a few hours with teacher students and whatever. But with the social work students, where I have a lot of time, what I work on is precisely their attitudes. So what I work on is making them realize the values that exist within our society, that they have been brought up within, as I have been brought up within, and that no matter, you know, the dominant discourse, that those dominant values are so strong that there is parts of it within us, for sure, beyond a doubt. So to recognize those bits, to identify them, and to look at them, and to say, okay, this is what I was taught. Is this still valid now? So to actually reflect on those things that are within them. But also to recognize that really they are so strong that even somebody who is going to be 57 years old in a few weeks' time, like me, and who has been working on these issues, even on myself, for at least, let us say, between 35 and 40 years. No, is that? Yes. It's shocking, it's shocking. Still, sometimes I will slip up. Sometimes I will open my mouth and say something, and I say, or almost say something, or say the first of something, and then manage to pull it back, because they have been so, the ideas, the attitudes have been so deeply ingrained within us. And these attitudes, although we do not wish to cause harm, we will cause harm because of these attitudes. So we really have to work on them. So I just wanted to throw that in there. So we were asked about measures for sexual violence, the issue of third-party reporting, and attitudes and training. Who would like to? Yeah, Meta?
Yes, that was a very good point about gender-based violence and sexual violence, because that's what we are raising as an issue with our authorities. A couple of years ago, we had a program on prevention of violence against women that covered gender-based violence, but as much progress has been made in combating domestic violence, the victims of sexual violence and other gender-based crimes somehow got left out. And the National Program on Prevention of Violence Against Women was discontinued because of this domestic violence law, and because of this new national program on prevention of domestic violence and support to victims. So we are trying to, not only we, but other women rights NGOs and support services providers are trying to work with authorities to return the focus on victims of sexual violence as well. And I think now there is a task force set up for ratification of Istanbul Convention, so that this focus can be returned to other gender-based crimes. And there is a EU Victim Rights Directive, and there are measures that are directly related with victims of sexual crimes. So I think that's a really good point, and we shouldn't just leave out other victims. And another good point was made about reporting, because what we saw from the presentation yesterday, that the reporting rates are not satisfactory, and we want the women to report, but we want to make sure that when they report, they are treated fairly in the proceedings, and they get the treatment they deserve, and protection and support. Because from our surveys, what we notice that of course, the way the women are treated from the very first contact with the police officer, it entirely determines their experience of the proceedings and whether they will ever report again. And we tend to notice this sort of extreme differences in experience. So one woman reported twice, and her first experience was very positive, because the police officer was very helpful, the investigation was successful, it ended up in conviction. And when she returned to police for the second time, her experience was entirely different, because instead of professional conduct, she received this unwanted counseling and advice and blaming attitudes and so on. So what we noticed that indeed now the treatment of victims in the proceedings depends entirely on how considerate the individual officer is, and depends entirely on the attitude of the individual police officers. So we have this obligation in the EU Victims' Rights Directive that every victim of crime should be treated with respect in a sensitive and professional manner, and we think that definitely there should be some guidelines, uniform guidelines that would be applicable to each victim of domestic violence and other crime, how the victim should be treated in the proceedings. There is some of the confusion what I noticed in Lithuania when we talk about the respectful and sensitive treatment of victims. They sometimes tend to misinterpret it and tend to believe that now they will have to offer victims emotional and moral support and become social workers and psychologists. And they are not entirely sure what exactly is expected from them. So I think we need to go into their practice, into the daily work, and just see how you need to change your daily practice. So for example, if we talk with judges, we say, like, if you have a victim of sexual assault in your courtroom, it's the way you ask questions. I mean, do you ask her, why did you go into that apartment where you were assaulted? But you can ask, can you tell me what happened that night? So this will change the victim's experience completely in the proceedings. Yes, so I think I'll pass.
Thank you. I would like to also address both of the questions. First, about this special procedures in other kinds of violence or gender-based violence. Since 2013, we adopted the EU legislation on victims of crimes, and I believe we are at the beginning. It's even though it's adopted, it's not fully implemented in practice yet, I can say, but it's a really good grounds for a future improvement of the situation. And the law recognizes the vulnerable victims, which includes, of course, for example, victims of rape. And the law also recognizes special procedures for those kinds of victims, and I believe this is the way. So that's the approach I believe that might be applied. And to address your question, yes, that's a topic that I really like very much, because I realize I do police training, and it's really not easy to change the attitude of police officers. Believe me, it's not. So what helped for us, or what worked for us, was videos of victims with their statements. Preferably keep it up to 15 minutes, not very long, but the emotions are there, and they can see not any general case, but they can see specific victim with her case, with her experience, and how police intervention affected the case in a good way or in a bad way. Also, we do play role situations, role play situations, I'm sorry, and officers, they see what happens before the patrol arrives, and the difference between what really happened and what the patrol realizes, or by questioning. And they then say, well, that was quite a difference, and perhaps that helps them to imagine what happens before they come to the scene. And we also invite, and this is quite important part of the training, we invite professionals from NGOs who work with victims to represent victims in the training, and to explain about their feelings, about their needs, and so on, not theoretically, but again based on their experience with direct work with victims. And I believe that this is perhaps not directly, but it's a voice of the victims in the training. And I believe training can change the attitudes depending on the quality of the training. It's not just providing information, that's not very helpful. But this is what we really focus on, is not give them data, and that's it, but really discuss the matter, and not just saying this is right or this is wrong, but really a discussion among the officers, for example, and trying to find acceptable solution for the situation, and trying to explain what the consequences of the police intervention will be.
We do similar things during our training, like role plays, but also what we use to sensitize and to change attitude of professionals is also organizing tribunals on violence against women, when we give voice to women who experience violence, or families of women who were killed based on domestic violence, previous domestic violence history. And we also saw that this is very often quite effective. And for me, on one of our tribunals, this is the idea that we invite various professionals and politicians also to hear the stories. And I never forget, on one of our tribunals, we had a woman who was a Supreme Court judge. And after one story, she started nearly to cry, and I could see a lot of emotion on her face. And she said, "Oh, this is too emotional. I cannot hear any more of these stories." And she was a criminal judge for 30 years. And I asked myself what she was doing for 30 years, because she didn't listen these stories. And afterwards, when she retired, she became our volunteer. And I see really the difference. She's now very supportive to all women who are coming, and she's volunteering her time, and also persuading other judges and writing different support letters. So I think listening to real stories and involving victims, it's a really very powerful experience and can change the attitudes. We also do work with women through the theater method. So they, this is the form of therapy. When they, at the end of after 1 year of the therapy, there is a performance prepared by them based on their real story, and they are the actresses. And we invite also many professionals to hear that. And it's also so when they hear and see that, very often this is really eye-opening for them, that they never saw their behavior from this perspective. Our last performance was on the experience of women in the court. So we invited many judges also to hear how women saw how they behave towards them during the court proceedings. But I think you cannot, and this is my experience also from many of the trainings we did with the police in the past, that sometimes there are people who really cannot change, although you see that you thought that you were very successful, you had these role plays, and the people understand, it seems like, but at the end they ask the same question and they show the same behaviors as before. So in my opinion, actually, we should really concentrate on that specialized unit and to really select people who have motivation and who are on whose attitude we don't have to work so hard, because sometimes it's not possible really to change it. So I think this is the way to avoid this also victimizations of victims, to really select people who can work, who are empathetic and who have the motivation and knowledge. And it's also cheaper than to invest and train all people who will be working and may have contacts with victims of different forms of violence. As concerns sexual violence, in Poland we don't have the specialized services, and I hope it will be introduced after the convention was ratified. And as my colleague yesterday mentioned, recently, last year actually, the law was changed to allow the public prosecution of rape. And I remember for many years the discussion that we shouldn't introduce that provisions because the victims may be victimized, so we should leave the decision in their hands. No, there were various attempts to introduce various procedures and guidelines for various professionals, how to deal with sexual violence. Some years ago, the head of the police introduced the order to mandate that only women can interview women victims of sexual violence, but I think it didn't work. Also, sometimes women are not, unfortunately, very sensitive towards other women. And as concerned the reporting, the third-party reporting, I think in our law it says that actually it mandates various professionals to report cases of domestic violence. This is the law on domestic violence. but this is very rarely the case. And at our center, we had the decision that, of course, the main decision is in women's hands. But in case of high risk, we decided a few times to report, notifying women that we do that because we thought that there is a very high risk that women could be killed. And once I remember that was on the request of a mother of a victim who refused to testify, to report, and we did it on behalf of her mother.
We have a few minutes left. I don't know if there's anybody in the audience who would like to talk about good practices, maybe in their organizations or that they know of. No. Wow. Then it is almost 10:30. Yes, there is. Yes, there is. Is there?
Dobrý den, já asi...
Good morning, I will start in Czech.
Thank you for your discussion. So far, at the moment, I would like to ask you if there is a special attention in your approach to intersection of discrimination, and mainly I'm speaking about older women. The question of older women as victims, older women who are disabled, older women who suffer by mental health diseases and are always the victims. Do you handle the topic so far? Thank you very much.
I'm not 100% clear if I understood. So you're saying are older women and women who are disabled or have mental health issues, do they still receive services? Are they still considered? And do people's attitudes towards them, are they also considered? Okay. It's dangerous leaving me with the microphone in my hand. In terms of attitudes and in terms of what we're talking about and the dominant values and so on, yes, absolutely. I use this not just in relation to domestic violence or gender, but also in relation to all the isms, so in relation to race and ethnicity and religion and age and disability and LGBT and mental health, which I consider as a specific thing on its own. So yes, I do it in all of the things, because we have ideas which have been put into which we have absorbed because we were brought up wherever we were brought up, and those ideas are very fixed and they affect the way that we react and our interpersonal skills. So in relation to police, not only police, but also possibly judges and prosecutors and whatever. And a lot of the things that Vladi was mentioning, they are interpersonal skills. They are skills on how to relate to people in a way that shows that you are considering them as an equal, as opposed to as somebody who is below you or who you have no concern for. And I think that interpersonal skills that we learn as we are growing up normally, and then if we enter a specific profession like social work, we have lessons on it and we are taught specifically how to listen and how to respond and all this. Many other professionals do not learn, and because of the dominant discourses in our society, the dominant ideas, for example, police are often considered they are an authority, they are a force, and this is part of their professional sort of ethos, and therefore they do not necessarily always treat other people as if they are equals, but possibly as if they are underneath them because they are the force. And it's not because they're not nice people. It's because it's the almost a professional ethos. Are there many police officers here? Are there any police officers here? Apart from you, yes, I know you are. Yes, and we have another one there. I'm sorry if I'm not intending to offend in any way, but it is very often the situation. I'm going to give you like literally 2 minutes each to close up. This was supposed to be about good practices, and we have indeed heard good practices. I am very impressed, Meta, by your idea of an online training course, because there is a great problem reaching people. So if you manage to do a good online training course, which I'm sure you will manage to do, I think that is an excellent way of reaching people. Vladi and his specialized police force squad, again, so necessary, and it sort of speaks to Ursula's, the good practice of Ursula in the centers where they have a police officer who is there twice a week, but it is a different police officer, so you need to have somebody who has had the training and the experience, and is specifically respectful and sensitive, and knows about the issues. So I will give you 2 minutes each, and then we will close because it is actually 5 minutes into our coffee break.
Okay, so if I can, I will use my 2 minutes to respond to the question that was raised, because I think that's a really good point, and we are now actually very much focused on the EU Victim Rights Directive, because it does include this individual assessment of each victim according to her individual needs, and there is an obligation to with conducting individual victim needs assessment to take into account gender, disability, ethnicity, and other specifics that might impede victims' full participation in the proceedings or impede her access to information, legal aid, specialized support, and so on. So I think that's a good point, and we need not to forget that we are dealing not only with women as a group, but there is a multiple discrimination involved in certain cases, and that we have to focus on each individual victim with all her specific characteristics.
Well, to sum up, today's experience showed me again that the domestic violence is something that it's really throughout the nations and countries phenomena, and I am very happy to realize that we face the same difficulties, the same problems, and we can learn from each other's experience, and which is really a reason for organizing events like this and sharing this experience. And I'm very thankful to be here and to be able to hear what the experience of other countries are. And for example, the e-learning is exactly part of the project. I didn't mention it, but we use the same way to distribute the quality training, even though I know it's not the only way, but it's one of the ways we can reach the professionals in their own environment. So it's really contributing to hear what the experience abroad are. Thank you.
For me also it was an interesting experience to hear, especially in our countries, or how we are dealing with the issue of gender-based violence, or rather mainly in case of domestic violence. As we noticed, this gender is very much missing in all of the countries which are present here and making presentation. And I wish we could sometimes have a more in-depth discussion about various approaches to, and also like about this reporting by the third party, or mandatory reporting, because there are some experiences that it may also discourage women from reporting if she knows that the professionals will report against her will, and it may put her into the very dangerous situation. I think it will be really good sometimes to have more in-depth discussion about various approaches and learn from each other what works and what do not work. And also in the perspective of the EU directive, which was very differently, I think, implemented in all of our countries, and also we miss that in our law, for example, this individual assessment perspective, as well as special focus on victim with special needs. This is totally absent in our law. So I think this is also the issue which needs to be discussed further.
I thank you all very much. Audience, I particularly thank the panel speakers, Meta, Vladi and Ursula. It's now coffee break, and then after the coffee break at 11 you enter the other sessions, and one of the sessions is here and one of the sessions is upstairs, as previously explained to you. Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm sorry if I was cutting you short. No, no, and you know, it's amazing. You think an hour and a quarter, I'm going to speak 10 minutes each, it's going to be okay. It just disappears, doesn't it? It just disappears.
As I understand, this tool, it's meant to share the information so the victim doesn't need to repeat all the time.
No, this is not the case. No, actually, the system says that these institutions which are obliged to start with Skype, like policemen, for example, social welfare, doctors, and so on, so they have to fill the Skype, and then when the Skype is sent to this entity, so they have once more call the extremely near to the same card. So the victims repeat it. Oh, really? So it's different. The idea of sending a justice not to repeat that.
Yeah. It's a very good approach.
Yeah, I really like it.
Thank you very much.
And again, I'm sorry if I...
Well, we have our time limit.
thinking here to just say Pudera.
in the Information Society 8, is there present participation? So this is first page. Make the phone. Is the first third actor? State and NGOs, okay. Yes. Actually, because of the time given, and I actually don't speak so much about the women's organization. I speak
Mine, I just put
mostly,
like this.
but
Yeah.
this is
But
this
it's
is
just
true.
to give the context. And then I was thinking, Kiselagova, this is the story of a girl. That she had made a mistake in the pronunciation of the Glava head. And then someone recorded, so it went viral. Everyone was laughing. And millions of viewers in Bosnia. And the girl, it said psychological help. So the YouTube video is the story about this
that
video
freak.
and the stalking, because it's continuing even now. I was thinking of Facebook for now, but there is also the other story of the guy that made the video of the girl because of love.
Yeah, that one was also quite interesting.
I will write also here.
Which is also good because it's not like, like showing like the specificity about like the context, like, it's not like so seen like it is like the violence against women, yet it's so violating and it's coming from the same roots and ICTS.
So I just wanted so that we end that, and then we go with the first question, the general one. And I will start with you, and then just in the order. This is in general, so that people can introduce themselves in a human way. And then we go to the second question.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
And I will try to monitoring the time. Here. My phone is too much.
Okay. It sounds good.
that they have to change this, and then we can sit where
Hi.
Do you have presentation? Do you?
Yes, but the thing is I forgot to copy the right one on my memory stick. So I had my colleague email me a much larger one. So what I need to do is just flip through it really fast. Because I only want to use these slides. So
I'm
if I
not
could
sure
sit
if
next.
this computer is connected to the internet. Actually, let's try.
Oh, I did send it to her. So I sent it to her yesterday. So it should be there.
But now you have to download it.
No, it's already downloaded and sent. The thing is, I need to be able to go through it myself because I'm only using 3 of the slides.
usually when I sit, I take more space.
No, placed everyone.
And then it would go.
Please show me when my time starts ending or
Yeah, that's why.
then it's easier.
That one.
I think it's really important also for us.
I think this is the old version.
Oh, I see.
And the newer one, I might put something which they are not interested at all.
But let me take a look. Because it might be okay. Yeah, this is fine.
Not be there.
That is good. It's perfect.
It's not. Now I'm happy. I have all my little papers.
Yeah. No, full. So if I do this, that's not going to come up.
It's going to be set. It doesn't matter. You can just flip to the.
Great, thanks. Can I sit here? I don't think they put out new ones.
Okay, so yeah, you can sit here because you are the only one who has presentation. So
Okay.
it's the best if you
Sit next to the computer.
change you the letters out.
Yes.
Waters and I don't know if
And the
Nobody
signs
took
also.
care about you girls to do it for you. Oh well.
so. Let's take off.
Hello.
Hello, Tauron.
I'm Katerina Filova from APC Association
All
for
right.
Progressive Communication.
Great.
I had about your great presentation in CSW actually from my colleague. So she was the one who actually put me in touch with you and recommend you for this panel.
Right. It was my colleague, Ronald.
Oh, so it wasn't.
He had the
oh,
actual
okay.
presentation, but I was in charge of the entire session.
I see,
Yes.
I see.
So we had, a women's activist group from New York and a researcher from Norway who researched on gender-based hate speech in online games. Very interesting.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah.
Very
It
interesting.
was a great session.
It's actually, I really like your framing of the lawful hate speech.
Yes.
Because we also, aside of the gender-based violence, we also do a lot of work with the sexual rights and sexual rights groups. Like every year we do like a survey among the sexual rights groups, mostly from the south part of the world, and like finding out how much they are actually. It's about the use of the internet and their work. For them is, from many of them actually, from like the places like the Lebanon, Pakistan. It's like the essential tool because they can't organize, but they organize on the internet. But then there is like the censorship, there is hate speech, which is it's quite interesting in this context.
Yes.
Even more.
And also to avoid discussions about freedom of speech and, restrictions to freedom of speech because then you get lost.
That's also very hard because it's kind of like we are kind of stuck because we are primarily like working around the internet rights and we sit on this in the sexual rights and the women's rights and how does it play together, especially in relation to the anonymity, privacy, freedom of expression. Very complicated. And we don't have actually answers on
I
many
don't
of
think
these.
anyone does actually.
One more water, and I'll try to find the.
Is that what is here? What is here? Four. It's okay. Yes.
Nervous.
You're nervous.
I'm always nervous.
Don't be nervous.
I'm a nervous person.
be only my fault. Whatever happened, it's my fault. Moderator's fault. Is that correct? It will be my fault. Is that
Everything is your fault, definitely.
correct? Oh, she's relieved.
No, I'm not blaming you at all.
You don't have to blame. I can keep it.
We'll demand compensation, so, you know.
And cakes and coffee. Shall we start? Shall we start? Hi, welcome. So as we were thinking, this should be an informal panel. So as you can see, there are no names here in front of us, but I will do the part. So I will first introduce myself so that you know a bit who I am, what I'm doing, and I will briefly introduce the panelists, these three wonderful professional activists and public officers. And what we would like most of all is to have the chance to listen from you. Because I think it's also important for us, if we talk about ICTs, if we talk about the internet, that we remember and remind to ourselves that internet is a two-way communication. So we don't only talk, we should listen, we should respond on input, and we should embed and integrate all the comments. So my name is Valentina Pellitzer, and I'm a migrant, a Southern Italian that moved more than 20 years ago in the Western Balkan, and I live in Bosnia-Herzegovina. And there I run a little organization that is working on internet rights with the intersection on women's rights, trying to use the technology in a more transformative way, because we think that technology is not neutral, but we also think that technology can transform the way we think, the way we act, the way the world is designed. So here we have Katerina Fialova. She's coordinating a very interesting web platform, Gender IT, and she also leads the research from impunity to justice. She's part of an international network and organization, the Association for Progressive Communication, which is one of the organizations that try to advocate for a more just and social approach to internet. So, Piret Urb, we are very happy, an Estonian important woman. She was leading a few years ago the Freedom Online Coalition. So it's a representative of a government, but also is a person that is really very much into the online discourse at the higher level, where the international policy, the global policy define how we could live and use the internet and technology at the very local level. At my right, there is Taran. I can't pronounce Taran. Your last name, I will just make a massacre. Working for the Norwegian Ombudsperson office. She's an expert not only on the issue of discrimination against the women, but also on discrimination and way of implementing a better society for people with disability, and on the specific intersection with race. And now, while I unlock my computers, because if you work in the internet, you believe the security is an issue, here we are. So I will just give a few highlights, and then I hope that we can listen to our panelists and that you can listen to yourself. So, first of all, is virtual real? How are women and girls doing in information society age? No presentation. Is their presence and participation in information and communication technology age unconditional? You had seen during this day the presentation of the result of the fundamental rights, the FRA EU-wide report. And I would like just to highlight that 20% of the women have experienced stalking, and they had to change their email address or their phone number. And 1 in 10 women had experienced inappropriate advances on social website or subject of explicit sexual mail or text message. As you can see, telephone, SMS, it's really one of the tools that can target women. And every second woman has experienced sexual harassment at least once in her life, which include me. Where majority happen in the employment context, which is important for us to reflect that very often the offender is not the unknown, the stranger that is very far away from us, the tiger of the internet trying to reach ourselves and our children. So now the point is, how is the new social public space of social network and social media safe for women and girls? What role play the main actors? So states, internet intermediaries, the big Google company, the telecoms that are very often internet providers, and which kind of response institution, gender mechanism, or women organization provide. So are the telecoms helping and assisting and encouraging women to report? Is the police and the justice system in general ready to respond when women come forward? And are women NGO organization focusing on way to respond, to react? So can they recognize that there is an harm? There are many organizations in the world on traditional violence against women. Are they equipped to recognize the importance and the relevance of the violence that happen online? So is it a new form of violence, or it's the old one that we knew? So before to giving the word, I would like just to come back to our bodies. I will tell you 3 short stories that are not unique, but that happen to 3 young women in Bosnia and Herzegovina. It's one girl, she was on the school excursion, and she happened to say a sentence, I will say in Serbo-Croat, kisela me glava, but in Bosnian usually used to say glava. So she had a fault in pronunciation because she was speaking a local dialect. Someone taped it, put online, and those went viral. It has 1,000 and 1,000 of viewers. The girl had to seek psychological support because she became the meme. The sentence was just everywhere, everywhere. And mainstream media also took. Another story of a YouTube story. YouTube is very important in the life of youngers and young women. So one girl, one day called me. We were collaborating. An ex-boyfriend had put a video online of herself. The video was not sexually explicit, where all the images of her participating in this traditional chorus. She's singing a Muslim traditional chorus, and other images of her. And this was this text going there saying how she was the love of his life, and they will be forever together. She cannot understand how important he was, and that's it. So the girl didn't tell about the story to her parents, so she was scared. We took 2 days to take it off, but of course in this little village of Bosnia, the video wasn't hit. So she had been confined to her home. She didn't receive the telephone for a few months. After that, the guy insisted. So then the parents went to the police, but the police said, but it's all about love. You know, it's not serious. At this stage, this young woman is married, as a son, a girl actually. This guy keep appearing in her social network, continuing to explain how he's the man of her life, how this boy, this young girl that is born, would be far more nicer if it was his own daughters. And this girl had changed several times her telephone. You could imagine when she was starting this serious relation, she was really in doubt if she could tell to her partner. Would her partner understand that she was not responsible for this? The guy is there. He continues to pop up in her life every now and then. We talk something that happened 3-4 years ago. And another story. A story between a young man, 20 years, and a young girl, 16 years old. They had love, they had sex, they split. But then the guy decided with his friend to make an advance of love. So while she was coming to school, he and his friend were recording his declaration of love, and since she didn't want to have anything to them, of course she became the whore. And the guy explained in detail how she was having sex with her. The video was online. Mainstream local television took, and they were talking about this act of love, because indeed, he just loves her. So this is, coming back to the point, is it really what is virtual? Is it real or not? And now, my first question to our panelists, because it's important that you also listen to them, because gender and ICT is also an empowering tool. So for us, it's important to listen from each of them, their perspective, how this tool empower, but also which are the growing concerns from their perspective, from their experience when technology intersect with violence. I would like that Katja start.
Děkuji, dobrý den.
Thank you very much. My name is Kateřina. As Valentina said, I'm working at the Association for Progressive Communication. I can see that all of you are putting on the headphones, but I will speak in English. I do apologize.
So, and I also want to warn you, I'm not a very good speaker and I tend to be very nervous, so please bear with me. My name is Katerina and I am from the Association for Progressive Communication and I live in Czech Republic. I would like to share with you today some of our work in the area of violence against women online. In particular, I would like to make a point that violence against women online is part of same continuum as violence against women offline, and present you some of the challenges faced by the victims of online violence. Today, online spaces such as social media and alternative news sites have become very important sites of political, economic, social, and cultural participation for women and girls worldwide, ranging from organizing against discrimination and exclusion to running a profitable businesses or making informed decisions about their sexual health. Governments are also increasingly using the internet to provide services and information to citizens. However, there is also a growing trend to silence women and keep them out of online public spaces, as well as technology development, through tactics which are very familiar from offline violence, such as harassment, intimidation, or invasion of privacy. Since 2005, APC maps and analyzes violence against women online, as well as works with women's rights organizations and individual women's and girls' internet users to challenge harmful sexist practices and promote women and girls' control of technology. Recently, we have launched findings from our multi-country research that was looking particularly at the violence against women online and at their access to justice. The research was carried out across 7 countries. We have carried research in Bosnia-Herzegovina, in Pakistan, Philippines, Colombia, Mexico, Democratic Republic of Congo, and Kenya. When we started doing this work, we have been often asked, why are you doing this? Where there is so much real violence against women in the world. This is luxury. Let me tell you one story which shows why not only is it misleading to think that there is no connection between offline and online violence, but also to show that this attitude of not seeing it as real has devastating consequences for women. I will tell you story of Luisa, 40-year-old woman from Mexico who lives with her partner, Luzma, and with Luzma's 3 children. Luisa works as a psychologist and activist for women's and sexual rights. Because of her lesbian rights activism, she was subjected to violent harassment, including threats of her house being burned down and her daughter raped, as well as to surveillance via cell phone, via social media, and via email. One of the threats, for example, said, "We know where you are, what time you meet. We know that you are turning women into lesbians. You are a pig and you are going to rot in hell." The repeated violence deeply affected Luisa as well as her family. She recalled in her story, which she told us, that she didn't want to leave the house. She was completely terrified and felt also very guilty because it was her who put the address of her home on the internet because she wanted to promote her businesses and her counseling for the lesbian women. She was worried not only, of course, for her partner and for her children and for herself, but also for her patients, clients. So Louisa's case study shows that violence against online is really part of same continuum as offline violence. It is manifestation of same historical unequal power relationship between men and women and systematic gender-based discrimination. While online encompass a whole range of abusive acts. So, for example, very brutal, actually, violence which is happening online is filming of sexual violence or rapes and then distributing them online. And survivors very often recount to us that whenever they see that movie or pictures online, they really feel like going through the violence again and again, and they never know, and it will pop up. So it's very stressing for them. There is also online harassment and stalking of women, as was also highlighted by the survey, EU-wide survey on violence against women conducted by the FRA. Another type of violence is, for example, distribution of photos, videos, usually personal, intimate photos, videos of women without their consent. At all 25 case studies we have collected through the APC research, survivors speak about substantial emotional and psychological distress, which impeded their full participation in every aspect of their life, from work to education to social relationship. Emotional and psychological distress of victims of violence against women online is augmented by two distinct characteristics of online spaces. The first is the rapid dissemination of information that exposes survivors to the continuous traffic of harassing texts and images. And the other is anonymity, which leaves survivors in uncertainty about the identity and intention of the abuser. So it's very difficult often for them to tell if it's just some teenager who lacks empathy, or if it's real aggressor who will follow through their threats. And I will end up here.
Thank you. So just the silence, the repetition, the violence continues and can be, and just please note that all this experience come from the south of the world. Maybe Europe also can learn, the European Union this time, from this part of the world about remedies. And now I give the word to Taran.
Thank you. My last name is Knudstad. I want to thank you for inviting me to this panel, and it's my first time in Prague, and I have to say it's a ridiculously beautiful city. It's just, I want to talk to you about the Ombud's report on gender-based, or actually hate speech, lawful hate speech and hate crime. I left 5 copies on the table over there, but I think they're all gone, so. And today I'm going to focus on lawful gender-based hate speech and not hate crime, because, well, you'll see why. I just wanted to give you a list of types of gender-based hate speech so that you can see the continuum from lawful gender-based hate speech to criminal gender-based hate speech. So threats and violence and incitement to gender-based violence obviously is criminal. But sexist rhetoric, stigmatization, morality policing, glorification and denigration of women in games, sexual and gender harassment in general, and glorification of sexual denigration of women in pornography are all legal, lawful. And we touched upon pornography yesterday, and I think I agree that pornography poses probably the most serious threat, I think, to women and girls today. So the reason that the Ombud wanted to emphasize the importance of discussing lawful gender-based hate speech is because it causes harm to society. And at least in Norway, these harms have not been addressed by politicians, and very few organizations work with the harms of lawful hate speech. I think one of the reasons is that usually when we talk about hate speech, we end up in discussions about freedom of speech and freedom of expression, and whether or not we should impose restrictions on freedom of expression. And so to avoid that discussion, we emphasize always that we do not want to introduce new legislation to add restrictions to freedom of expression. We do want, however, measures to combat lawful gender-based hate speech. In Norway, usually when we talk about hate speech, especially politicians, but also the media, tend to focus on, we have in our fairy tales trolls. I don't know if you're familiar with that. And we say that trolls disintegrate in the sun. And that's the approach that our society has taken to hate speech. The idea is that if you allow it to come to the surface and become part of public discourse, it will be cleansed, you know, in the discussions in the public. There is absolutely no research to suggest that that's true. On the contrary, it seems that hate speech creates more hate speech and lowers the threshold for what's considered appropriate in the public discourse. And so the Ombud has, in our report, we talk about some of the harms that we have recognized. The list is probably longer, but what we see is that it promotes social exclusion. It produces a chilling effect, which means that it keeps people from participating in the public discourse because of the hate speech they receive. We've met with several girls and women who say that they no longer want to be part of the public discourse because of the harms, you know, because of the hate mails and phone calls and text messages, and you know that they receive 24 hours, 7 days a week. And so it's a problem for our democratic system because it creates a culture of fear. Also, we see that it perpetuates bias that I mentioned before. That you could hate speech is a symptom, like you talked about too. That there's a continuum between the face-to-face violence and harassment of women and what goes on online. But it's more than that because it creates hatred also. Gender-based hate speech devalues women also in the eyes of innocent bystanders, and that's important to be aware of, that it's not simply the person who promotes the hate speech, but also bystanders are affected by what is being said. And, well, it produces fear, anxiety, and distress, and it strips women of their dignity. And I want to just go through very quickly the measures that the Ombud is recommending that the government sets in motion. One is to focus on negative gender stereotyping and hate speech and prejudice in school curriculum, and also in vocational education. We need money to research on the prevalence and the social harms of hate speech. We need to know who is affected how, because women are exposed to certain kinds of hate speech. This report is not only on gender, it's on ethnicity and religion and so on and so forth. So we need to know on what venues are what groups exposed to what kind of hate speech, and what are the social harms for the various groups. Also, we need money to research on media self-regulation, and when we suggested this measure, we made sure to that from our perspective, we don't ask the government to tell the media to, you know, put restrictions on their freedom of speech, but we do need researched on various methods that the media has used, such as moderation and full name policy. And in Norway, public authorities have a duty to actively promote equality. We think that that duty should be specified so that it addresses specifically prejudice, stigmatization, and stereotypes, which means promoting good relations between social groups. We also suggest that we initiate campaigns of awareness to counter hate speech and promote responsibility and expression. I don't know if that's the right word in English or the right expression in English, but in Norwegian we have a word that says you have freedom of expression on the one hand, and then you have a responsibility as a, as a carrier of that right to behave responsibly when you use your freedom of speech. And also, I think we need to support civil society's work against hate speech, because they do get both individuals come to them and talk about their experiences with hate speech, and some organizations have like buttons that you can press to report incidents of hate speech. What they don't have, civil society, they don't have the resources to adequately systemize this information and to analyze it so that we can use it in order to create targeted measures. Okay, so I think I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So it's interesting. Trolls disintegrate in the sun.
Myslím, že jste to dobře vystihla z toho hlediska norských zkušeností. A když mluvíme o svobodě projevu, svobodě slova, tak bychom měli dát slovo estonské kolegyni. Děkuji, Valentino.
Good morning.
Dobré dopoledne.
As our moderator said,
Jak říkala
I'm
paní
working for the
moderátorka,
government,
pracuji pro
so
státní
my
správu.
views and statement is related to very much related to the Estonian government's views. I've been working with human rights a bit more than 5 years for now, and when Estonia prepared to start campaigning to become a member of the Human Rights Council, we had to pick up the 3 topics. What would be like our main topics during the 3 years of membership in the Human Rights Council, and what we picked up, it was women, the women's rights, it was children, and right to freedom of expression. So very much the relevant topics also now, and more relevant now, and especially all of them together by now. But this was the time 2011 when we decided our.
Všechno souvisejí. Když jsme definovali naše priority, tedy práva žen, práva dětí a svoboda slova, toto všechno spolu souvisí.
On the women and right to freedom of expression. As Valentina said before, I've been very closely involved with the Freedom Online Coalition during last years. I would like to pick up just where our Norwegian colleague stopped, because I got ideas what she said. It's very difficult to find a balance between hate speech and the right to freedom of expression. Many governments are struggling with that, but at the same time, the democratic countries cannot limit the right to freedom of expression and opinion. It's quite impossible. This is something what the totalitarian countries and regimes are doing. Of course, they have a bit other targets, but still we cannot go to the same level. The solution would be related to the resolution which was adopted in the Human Rights Council in 2012. That was the first ever resolution in the United Nations level which stated internet as a mean and which brought the internet as a tool for the right to freedom of expression to the UN, to United Nations. And the main point from the resolution was that rights have to be, that the right to freedom of opinion and expression have to be equally protected offline and online. So this is like a simple rule to follow for everybody. So which we wouldn't do offline, we shouldn't do it online either. And also now there are many discussions that international law has also to be equally applicable in both cases. Related to Estonia, what I wanted to say concerning the ICTS development, actually, Estonia was the first country recognizing practically that internet is a human right. In 2000, the government came up with a new telecommunications law which said that internet must be equally accessible to all. So this was like a turning point, that the internet was brought to really all the villages, mainly to the community centers, to the libraries and to schools. And then the ICT's development grew very fast. And at the same time now we understand that the technology has been developing much faster than the schools, local governments and the parents have been able to educate the people and children. So this is now what we all have to take up as fast as possible, actually, because there are all these bad cases, what Valentina said at the beginning, these three very sad stories, and we have to see what to do against that. So I will stop here at the moment. Thank you.
What a wonderful Okay, so another round of questions to our panelists, and then we wait for you. Intermediaries and private sector company. The research was also trying to address some of the big actors. What are your findings? Katja.
Okay, I will speak. So in terms of our research, and I forgot to mention that I have left some of the findings and some of the reports in the back table, so if you are interested, you can pick up some reports from the research. So as I already mentioned, we have focused it in particular on the access to justice for the survivors, because as we work with the survivors since 2005, we have found out this is one of the major gaps, that they really don't know where to turn to when violence is happening, and not only in terms of getting some justice, but even to stop violence. So there are two main actors who need to act with due diligence to address this gap in particular, and this is the state and the internet service providers. And as asked by Valentina, I will focus on others. So on the second one, so the internet service providers, which are not so common in relation to the violence against women's discussion. This is kind of like new actor who is entering in the debate. So the internet service providers who were involved in the case studies we have documented were 4 types of the providers. This was social media providers, search engines, pornography websites, and national telephony companies. According to our findings, most of the women, when some violence is happening to them, if they go somewhere to report it, they go to police. And only 8%, I think, of the women actually went to report it to the provider of the platform where violence was happening. And out of these 8 person, only 1/3 was actually acted on by the providers. So it gives us idea how tragic the situation is. Among the main barriers on the side of the providers are three factors. First is really the lack of awareness on the role technology and online platforms plays in facilitating violence against women online. And here is not only about thinking in terms of that there are actual violence happening, but it's also their role and kind of a complicity in creating the culture which tolerates violence against women, and which is creating culture on the online spaces which are becoming very hostile to women. And we can speak of Facebook, we can speak of social media platforms. We can also speak of many platforms where women technology developers are participating. There is also a lot of harassment and hate speech happening there. So companies need to first review their policies, terms of services, and community standards, so they do not treat content that glorifies rape and physical violence against women as being treated as free speech or humor, which is often happening on the social media platforms. There was a huge campaign 2 years ago against Facebook where they were approached by the US feminist group who was showing them examples of really violent pictures of women raped, women beaten, which were reported, but they haven't been taken down because on the basis that it's just a joke. The second, there is lack of transparency around reporting and redress process for survivors of violence against women. And this was primary problem we have been dealing with when we were conducting our research, because we couldn't find any information about what is happening there, what is happening with the reports, how the reporting process work, who process the reports, what training these people get, what are their time limits. We couldn't even find a person to talk to because you can't find any contact information online. Everything is automated. There is like the public email, you can approach them, but it's really difficult to find who are these people even. So this is a huge problem, not only in terms of the research and know what is happening, but it also was very distressing for the survivors themselves. All the survivors we have been speaking to and who have been facing some sort of violence on the social media platforms and who actually take a strength and reported it. They said that it was very, very distressing for them, the lack of complete transparency and communication between them and the platform. There is usually some button, you submit the report and you don't know what the hell is happening. You don't know if they are acting upon it, if they are taking it seriously, or if it's ignored at all. And the third point I would like to make is really lack of responsiveness to needs of non-US and non-European women in their terms of services and reporting systems. Because Facebook, Twitter, especially this, against concern, especially the social media companies which are worldwide, but they don't have local offices in each of the country. And most of them are based in US. They respond to the US legislation. So this is first big up. There also are, if they are aware to some extent about the gender and violence against women, it will be setting in the context of the US and Europe. And there is also a huge language barrier. And this is one example we have, there was few examples we have again heard in our case studies, but one of the example is example of Bagi from Pakistan, who was treated with really, again, extreme sexual violence, including threats of rape against her daughter, threats of murder, which you can probably be aware that in Pakistan is very often happening, especially if you are women's human rights defenders or sexual rights defenders. These murders are happening. These are not only threats. So she reported this to Facebook, but because the threats have been in text and there have been in Urdu, no one taken them down. No one responded to her. And she really suspects they don't have person who does speak Urdu and they didn't understood. So this is just to give us like idea where we are in terms of working with the internet service providers.
So again, internet is a global tool and also the platform. So whatever mechanism we put in place, if we put place in Pakistan, we need to think of the repercussion in Slovakia or in Czech Republic. And also the European Union, the Europe is a space of very fragmented language. And all these small communities suffer the same kind of challenge when we talk about reporting. So I would like to, if we can continue from the findings of your report, I'm also interested in listening more about the sexism, misogyny, homophobia component. And you had started talking about the relevance of data. So why data, how data are so important? We had saw from the report how they are collected, that are expensive, which is the frame in which they should be collected.
Data is important simply because if we want the government to develop targeted measures that actually work, we need to know what is going on. And today, at least in Norway, we know next to nothing about the extent of hate speech. We know very little about the perpetrators, if we can call them that. We know very little about what the media itself can do, what internet providers can do. What we do know is, I mean, it's anecdotal because of lack of research, but we do know that certain groups are more exposed to hate speech than others, and women, people with disabilities, ethnic minorities, sexual minorities are all groups that are particularly vulnerable to hate speech that is directed against you as a person. Because we have 2 surveys in Norway, and one was on journalists and editors and bloggers. And what that research tells us is that men are also harassed online, but the harassment is not directed towards characteristics of their person. Whereas hate speech against women always focus on her body, the way she looks, her sexuality. So it's very personal, and we need to know all of this to know what types of measures will best target what different kinds of hate speech. Because obviously also for men it's a problem to be to be exposed to hate speech, but it's rarely sexual. Very often it refers to, you know, his political opinions and not, you know, personal characteristics. And I think also we need knowledge so that we can start educating young people in schools. We need for teachers to have more knowledge, but they need research so that they can use that in their teaching in a good way. And we need for young people to have knowledge not only about hate speech and, you know, various forms of hate speech, but also about gender stereotypes. And I think we tend to forget to discuss gender stereotypes, but it's so important. Negative gender stereotyping is a root cause to gender discrimination. And the people who promote hate speech, they're not particularly innovative. You know, they're using whatever's out there already in dominant culture, such as the porn industry is definitely one big provider of, you know, various forms of very sexualized harassment and hate speech against women. And you mentioned the Facebook campaign that the Women Action and the media had together with Everyday Sexism. And they actually, at least at the time, succeeded somewhat to have Facebook change their policy. So we can actually do something. But we need to, so maybe we also need research about what kinds of actions civil society can do. But can I just, we were supposed to talk about actions, what to do, how to change things. And I want to just remind you that we can use CEDAW a lot more than we know, because CEDAW's Article 5 is about gender stereotypes and states parties' obligation to counteract negative stereotyping. So we can all use that in our work to combat gender-based hate speech.
Thank you. So, Europe, 42,000 women had been interviewed. For me, what is interesting, what I would like to listen, how the privacy, women's right to privacy and freedom of expression is relevant. Because if we are in control of our privacy, and we might have a wall against the trolls.
Thank you. the last really very last developments about the right to privacy is a fact that United Nations Human Rights Council established a mandate of the Special Rapporteur on the right to privacy. This is a completely new mandate created last March, and at the moment there's a call for the candidates. I think the call just finished. And at the beginning of July there will be a new Special Rapporteur who will start the job, and she or he will systematically monitor and assess the protection of the right to privacy by states and non-state actors. So she or he will also monitor the implementation of the obligations and responsibilities of everybody. So this is a new mandate, and I think it will not take very long time when the part of the report will exactly be the right to privacy of women. But this is also something what the states can suggest him or her when the person starts the job. Related to that, there is, of course, as you know, there is a Special Rapporteur on the violence against women. And now, during the Human Rights Council June session, there will be interactive dialogue with this rapporteur, and all the states can participate. So if you feel this is like very relevant topic, you can suggest your government to take up this online violence issue, for example, and suggest the Special Rapporteur on the violence against women to start looking into this issue. And I think if there are many countries who take it up, she will also focus on that in one of her next reports, for example. So, but as a solution for the violence against women, of course there are many solutions, but as one of the solution, what Estonia has been practicing is empowerment women. How the government can help women to take advantage of ICTS development. So this is a part what every country should do, actually. And like local governments, for example, they can do a lot. They can do trainings. First of all, they should make research. Who are the people in the community? What kind of trainings they would need? And very good would be if the person giving the training would be a woman, for example. This is like a psychological influence that the women who are there, they see that if she can do it, if she can even teach us, we can do it. We can do it as much that we are able to find an information in the internet. For example, the most relevant and simple information important for the women, like health information, legal information. For example, the women get to know about their right not to be discriminated, or the things like that, or they find the information where to call and whom to turn to, and what are the consequences and what are their possibilities to start like standing up against these kind of things. Related to ICTS development, it's also that it's more and more easier and cheaper to have mobile phones, and I think everybody has mobile phones now. So the state should open the helplines which are gratuitous, and all these women nowadays, at least in Europe, they do have mobile phones, so they can call there and talk and get also legal and psychological assistance. And always their husband or anyone else doesn't need to know about these calls. So at the beginning, so these are like very simple steps what the governments and also the local governments could do, actually. There is something interesting. I was attending a panel last Monday in Geneva, actually, where I learned about a new campaign. There's a campaign, Work to Equality, which is a campaign to encourage women to learn ICTs, but to learn like more than just to use. Because there are the women working in tech sector, they made the research that in the world there are only 28% of women working in tech sector globally. So there are many civil society organizations all over the world now who are cooperating, and the target is to increase these numbers, like really to empower women through that. And in these tech sectors, only 6 to 7% of the high-level positions are taken by the women, actually. So this is something where all of us we can do something, and we should work. Relate to right to freedom of expression and speech. There are still many women whose husband or someone else is checking their email. So this is also part what could be done during the empowerment women, during the trainings provided by the local communities or schools, that it's not only that they should teach women to use the privacy settings of their emails and Facebook and whatever, but it's also related to that they have to like convince women that the email is really private, and even you have like husband and very good relationships with someone, if you want to have your email private, you have really a right for that. And this is like a primary things where the empowerment women can start, actually. So I don't know if Valentina is watching me, like I have to stop here. Actually, there is one more, just very shortly, one more very interesting thing what I just learned on Monday. I attended another panel in Geneva because I didn't understand the title of the panel very well, and the title was Women and E-Waste. And I was like reading the title of the panel and thinking, what is that? I have to be there. I have to learn. I want to know what they are going to talk. And actually, finally, it was very interesting. It was again like kind of discrimination against women, but the e-waste, it means electronic waste, which is more toxic than ever before. And usually these are the women who are working with this waste. So, and it's not the case in Europe, I think, but in many other countries in the world, the women, for example, they are cooking on these burning chemicals, and very often they have like baby on their back during these things, and all these things actually which we never think in Europe, but there the panelists brought out like very serious cases and brought out the pictures of these situations. And the women living with the small children in these huge garbage mountains and really living there and spending their life there, and all these consequences. But it again shows that the women in general in all over the world need empowerment, and we have to do that. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for having also highlight how ICT can be a resource. If women own the technology, they can make a difference. And now it's your time. Any questions? We have 15 wonderful minutes.
Thanks so much. I think it was a great panel. I enjoyed all the presentations and opened my eyes to the subject. I was wondering, have you seen any positive examples of telecom companies or internet service providers that are doing anything to counteract violence on the internet? And also I was wondering, have you seen any examples where, for instance, say the police has a presence on the internet in order to find grooming or stalking or violence on the internet? Have you seen any examples of that? Because to me that seems to be a possible development, that agencies that have responsibilities to do this type of work in real life, they should start doing the work on the internet as well. Thank you.
Any other question, or do you want that we start answering? Okay, well, then we start answering. Any volunteer?
Thank you. It's a very, very fast answer, and it's rather also a suggestion and recommendation to all of you. For example, Google and Facebook, we have invited them to Estonia many times, and they have been there. They have been attending conferences and seminars, and they have been talking themselves how much they are fighting against this kind of things, actually. At how much for them it is difficult to see when the young mothers are posting like naked pictures of their children to Facebook and the things like that. So maybe this is also something to think, that if anyone in this room is planning to organize a conference in state level or the community, please invite Facebook or the others. I mean, they are really willing to come, and they are really willing to communicate, and usually they don't have also this financial problem to come. So as we understand, and they are in Dublin, for example, they come from Dublin, and they are really good when they are talking. They are bringing the examples which we couldn't think. For example, I've been with them and working with them in some conferences, and it's very good. So thank you.
I can maybe add, especially on some action we have seen so far from the internet service providers. As it was mentioned, the campaign which targeted Facebook, it turned out into content coalition. So there are a couple of groups, Association for Progressive Communication included, Everyday Harassment, Women's Actions, Media, and few other organizations. Most of the groups are from US, but they are also making effort to bring in the gender experts and women's rights activists from the other countries. And there are ongoing negotiations with the Facebook, also Twitter and Reddit also approached the coalition. And it is back and forth, and because a lot of stuff also involves investment on their side. So it's sometimes problematic. The first burst, like the positive burst we have seen, it was like, I think months ago, we could see that all three, Reddit, Twitter and Facebook, they have amended their policies. So as for now, it is not possible to post intimate personal pictures and without consent of the person. So you can post them, but you can also report them. If you are on the picture and you don't want that picture to be on the platform, you can report them as it violates your privacy. I think Reddit even extended it to some like the personal data. But there is, I think the major work really needs to be done on the gender sensitization of the people who are dealing with the content and who are doing the because the takedowns are happening anyway. The problem is that people who are working as the moderators, they don't understand usually. So there is really like the distinction. Not all the content which is explicitly sexual does need to be taken down. Women have also their rights to express sexually if it's consensual. But you can see like really, again, I would pick up on the Facebook. On the one side, they have been taking down the picture with the breast of the women breastfeeding. On the other hand, they would not take down the rape picture, or because there is not nakedness, but there is like the call for the rape, or target her, or raped her. So there is this distinction, and it may take a long time to go. But there are some first we could see.
We don't work with the internet service providers, so the Ombud, but we did have this session in New York where Women Action and the media were present and talked about their campaign. So we will follow up that session and invite them to Norway. So the plan is to actually start doing a bit more of that kind of work. When it comes to the police in Norway, that's usually linked to radicalization and extremism. So the government's action plan against radicalization and extremism does have one measure that says reinforcement of police participation on the internet, but it's not directed towards hate speech as such. So. Also there is a strengthened efforts against hate speech and radicalization online, which will be operated by Media Authority. I'm not quite sure how that will pan out. And again, it's primarily about extremism. So a lot of the work that is being done by the government is directed towards combating extremism and radicalization. So far, we have been promised an action plan. Actually, when the Ombud did a report, we talked with members of the government, and they said that they will present an action plan soon. It was supposed to come 3 weeks ago. We haven't heard anything. So, but supposedly they have a plan or they're working on a plan. But we'll see.
Okay, so just a bit about the police. Police very often says that if there is not a specific provision, they cannot do nothing. In the specific in Bosnia, if you go to the police, they will write down in a paper that has even not a progressive number. There are a unit of cyber police, but usually they are up to the big challenge of counterterrorism. And so it's really important, maybe in the Istanbul Convention that had been mentioned at several times could be of help. In the places where there are no specific law, where there are not laws that have criminalized, or if we don't want to go into this hyper-extension of little law. So considering that the Istanbul Convention has a more wider definition and comprehensive way, the countries that have ratified, maybe this can be a way to provide police with something concrete, because police will work only if they have a provision. Otherwise, they will not spend the public money.
I just want to add, in our research, actually, we have been also looking at the domestic legal remedies, and we have found out that there are actually provisions in each of the country. These range from the violence against women law, gender equality law, cybercrime laws. But the issue is that they are not recognized as the usable in these cases, because they don't specifically mention the online violence. So what does it happening? And this was something I have been actually talking to the panelists from the morning panel from the Czech police, that really what we found out that there is a gap in guidelines for the police, how to actually implement and how to work with the victims of the violence against women online. Because one thing which is distinct, there is usually missing the physical harm. So they tend to trivialize this. They tend to not see, they usually turn just women back when they have the effort and they find the strength again to report and to go to the police. The police says, but really, this is either they see like, this is not really so harmful, this is not so real violence, or they say, as Valentina was mentioning, we don't have anything we can use against it. So I think going through the guidelines may be like the first step. And I know that some activity like that was happening in UK like a year or 2 years ago, again after some of the campaign of some local bloggers and journalists, because they have been like 2 cases of violent harassments, and they found out that there is like, when they reported to police, they don't act. So then I think there was someone calling from the government and like developing guidelines for the police, how to act actually in these cases.
Okay, so any other question, comment, suggestion? Heading for the lunch. Okay, so I will then ask if each of you are ready to give just in 1 sentence, 1 or 2 sentences, your key message, something that you think can be an action point, or can be something that you want to highlight and to make sure that people will bring home. anyone who is ready.
I think, again, I'm thinking young people and gender stereotypes, actually. I'm thinking that we need more knowledge about, or young people need to learn about manifestations of gender stereotypes in face-to-face relations, and then you can use that knowledge to understand what goes on online, because there's a connection between the two. So I think what you find of hate speech online, you will also find in face-to-face situations between girls and boys. So actually, I think more knowledge would be a definite measure, a very important measure, and to make sure that that knowledge reaches young people, which means we need to have this on the curriculum in schools.
Thank you. I very much agree with our Norwegian colleague. But to add to that, on global level, for the first time in the next Internet Governance Forum, which will take place in November in Brazil, there will be gender-based violence online in the agenda. It's for the first time in this level in Internet Governance Forum. So there are the negotiations going this week to fix the agenda and the main subjects there, and this topic is very much in there. So, but just like for the last comment, a simple example that at the moment the African countries as a group of countries are now coming out with a resolution FGM, female genital mutilation. So 5 years ago it wouldn't have been possible at all, which shows that it takes time when the countries get ready for something. And I think now it's our time to really start fighting successfully against online violence. And I think at the moment all the countries have understood that it's existing. It's very, very serious. And sometimes it's even more serious. It's like doubling the harm when the physical violence have been filmed and posted online. It's like doubling or even more the harm caused to the victim. So it's our time to start fighting against it. So thank you.
It is very difficult to make the closing in one sentence. But I agree about some instruments which have been already mentioned here, which are promising, like the CEDAW and the recommendation number 19, which I heard should be reopened this year. So maybe there is a space for really include this form of violence in. Also the special reporting on privacy violence against women, Istanbul Convention, which actually mentioned the role of the internet intermediaries, and which is one of the few instruments I'm aware which actually take in account the violence against women online. I think also very important is really one of the strategy you have mentioned, which is gender empowerment and creating enabling environment for women and their access to the internet and their control of the technology. Because one of the most successful strategy so far against the hate speech is countering it with the more anti-hate speech. And the problem is that who has access to the internet and who is most visible on the internet kind of follow the same patterns of the gender inequality. So who is most visible there is imbalance. And I would like to really finish in a positive way. And last year we have came out with a very exciting document, which is Feminist Principles of the Internet. And it was put together with women's rights activists across the world. And then the principle number 3 says something which we should not forgotten, and which we should really keep in mind, that the internet is really transformative public and political space for women. And it facilitates new forms of citizenship that enable individuals to claim, construct, and express ourselves, gender, and sexualities. So it's why it is very important to not make this space hostile towards women.
So, thank you. I've been overwhelmed. There is so much content, statement, action point, way of thinking. I think I will spend the next week trying to unpacking all the input that I got. I hope that has been the same for you. I think that virtual is real because our body, our data is our body. And once that we are out, the internet never forgot and sometimes never forgive. So thank you very much for having paid attention and been so nice with us. Thank you.
Everybody should stay here and we will move on to plenary without the break. Yeah.
Okay, so just don't go away, stay here. The plenary is coming. The other group will come and join us so that we can have a joint and common closing.
according to the protocol, is it better to sit on right or?
Oh, it's the same.
Yeah, same for you. Okay.
But am I to speak hold
Yes.
this while I speak? Yes.
Yes, yes, and you can sit. You can sit.
Yeah. I don't think I need this.
I will be speaking in Czech.
What?
I will be speaking in Czech.
Will you?
Yeah, if you don't mind. So I can do it in English. I can do it in English.
No, it's the same for me. But she, the moderator.
She will speak in English.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and,
okay, so-
and she will start in English, then I'll come and you at the last.
Yeah, okay.
Can I have an opening?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
Are you going to speak as well?
I'm just going to read the declaration at the end.
Oh, okay.
Is this working? No. Yes. Can you hear me? Is this working? Yes. Welcome back, everyone, from the individual parallel sessions. I hope you had such interesting and enjoyable sessions as I did over the course of this morning. I found them really insightful and very inspiring. And again, as yesterday, I'm unfortunately unable to summarize them. But this is an opportunity to give some closing to our overall conference with my fellow companions up here on this big table. And so there's only a very few things that I think we should not forget as we leave this room and as we close this conference. And I would start out by one quote from Marcelina D. this morning, who started her introduction by saying, let's remember who we are talking about. As we talk policies, as we talk programs, as we talk institutional frameworks, let's not forget who in fact we are talking about, the thousands and thousands of survivors of gender-based violence and the incidents that are going on a daily basis. And highlight also one point that Urszula Nowakowska from Poland made about giving survivors a voice, giving women a voice, and the importance of empowerment. That I found one of the strongest points for me in the conversations today. Many of them were really about policies, institutional frameworks, mechanisms, but we do need to keep in mind who are the ones for whom all this is happening, in fact. The organizers of this conference, together with other actors, so namely the Committee for the Prevention of Domestic Violence and Violence Against Women, the Office of the Government of the Czech Republic, the Gender Equality Unit, and the Open Society Fund, the program Let's Give Women a Chance, have jointly prepared a call to action which they would like to see as an outcome of all of us, coming from all of us who participated in this conference today and yesterday, and who prepared this general call for action and message of the conference towards the states to join, meaning sign, ratify, and implement, according to the situation that obviously differs in each country, the Istanbul Convention. The text, which will be read to you in a few minutes in English and in Czech, is really linked to the convention and arises from the recommendations and the many discussions that we had over the course of this conference. And it is in fact intended, as I say, as a call for action and a tool of support to all those and us who are working on the signing and ratification process at the national levels and who are responsible for implementation and for monitoring the implementation once the convention is ratified. This call for action that is an outcome of this conference is not a single standing thing, as you will realize when you hear the words of the call for action. The document, in fact, is building on a series of initiatives that all of you represent and others in this country and in your countries, and campaigns. And as such, this call for action that comes out of this conference is joining the many other initiatives. After the conference, the call for action will be published via the conference website and a press release after the conference. And everyone will also be able to receive a copy of it individually and on behalf of their organizations in order to take it to the respective state bodies. So what I suggest that we do now, will it also be on the screen, Lenka? Okay. So what I suggest that we do now is, between me and my colleague Radan Šafařík from the governmental office, we will take turns in reading it, the call for action between English and Czech. So you actually need a microphone. And then as a kind of a celebration of the call for action, I invite you at the very end to clap your hands if you agree, which we all, those who worked on the call for action, obviously will hope you do. Okay, so call to action of the participants of the conference, a Europe free from gender-based violence, from commitment to action.
Prohlášení účastníků a účastnic konference Evropa bez genderově podmíněného násilí od závazku k činům.
We, the participants of the conference, A Europe Free from Gender-Based Violence, from Commitment to Action, which took place on May 27 and 28 in Prague, hereby present this joint call to action to tackle domestic and gender-based violence.
My, účastníci a účastnice konference Evropa bez genderově podmíněného násilí od závazku k činům, pořádané ve dnech 27. a 28. května 2015 v Praze, tímto představujeme společnou výzvu k postupu při řešení problematiky domácího násilí a násilí založeného na pohlaví.
Considering that gender-based violence is the result of an imbalance of power between men and women, and is leading to serious discrimination against women, both within society and within the family.
S ohledem na skutečnost, že násilí založené na pohlaví je výsledkem historicky nerovných mocenských vztahů mezi muži a ženami a vede k vážné diskriminaci žen ve společnosti i v rodině.
Gender equality means equal visibility, empowerment, responsibility and participation for both women and men in all spheres of public and private life, and equal access to and distribution of resources between women and men.
Rovné příležitosti mužů a žen znamenají rovnost ve zviditelnění, zodpovědnosti a zastoupení žen i mužů ve všech oblastech veřejného a soukromého života a rovný přístup ke zdrojům, stejně jako jejich rovnoměrné rozdělení mezi ženy a muže.
Gender-based violence both violates and impairs or nullifies the enjoyment of human rights and fundamental freedoms. Women and girls are the main victims of gender-based violence. Women victims of such violence and children who witness it often require special support and protection because of the high risk of secondary and repeat victimization.
Násilí založené na pohlaví vede k nedodržování a porušování lidských práv a základních svobod. Ženy a dívky jsou hlavní skupinou obětí násilí založeného na pohlaví. Ženské oběti tohoto násilí a děti, které jsou jeho svědky, často potřebují zvláštní podporu a ochranu vzhledem k vysokému riziku sekundární a opakované viktimizace.
So we, the participants of the conference, call on the European countries to sign, ratify and implement the Council of Europe Convention on Preventing and Combating Violence Against Women and Domestic Violence.
Vyzýváme proto evropské státy, aby podepsali, ratifikovali a uplatňovali Úmluvu Rady Evropy o prevenci a potírání násilí na ženách a domácího násilí.
To adopt, review and ensure effective implementation of laws and comprehensive measures such as action plans that provide for multidisciplinary and gender-sensitive preventive and protective measures, including specialized police and justice units.
Přijali, přezkoumali a zajistili účinnou implementaci zákonů a komplexních opatření, jakými jsou například akční plány, které zajišťují systematické, multidisciplinární a genderově citlivé opatření v oblasti prevence a ochrany, včetně specializovaných jednotek v rámci policejních složek a justice.
Ensure at all levels active cooperation with non-governmental organizations involved in combating gender-based violence and secure their adequate funding.
Zajistili aktivní spolupráci na všech úrovních s nevládními organizacemi bojujícími proti násilí založenému na pohlaví a zabezpečili jejich odpovídající financování.
Provide or strengthen appropriate training for the relevant professionals dealing with victims and perpetrators of all acts of violence against women.
Poskytovali nebo posilovali dostatečné vzdělávání relevantních odborníků a odbornic pracujících s oběťmi i pachateli a pachatelkami všech projevů násilí páchaného na ženách.
Ensure the availability and accessibility of services, programs and opportunities for victims and survivors and their children for their full recovery and reintegration into society as well as full access to justice.
Zajistili obětem a přeživším i jejich dětem dostupnost a snadný přístup ke službám, programům a příležitostem, tak aby se mohli plně zotavit a znovu integrovat do společnosti, stejně jako přístup k dosažení spravedlnosti.
Recognize the important role the media can play in the elimination of gender stereotypes, including those perpetuated by advertisements, and in promoting non-discriminatory and gender-sensitive reporting, and encourage those who work in the media to develop and strengthen self-regulatory mechanisms to promote balanced and non-stereotypical portrayals of women.
Uznali význam médií a jejich roli v odstraňování genderových stereotypů, včetně těch, které jsou posilovány komerční reklamou, a v podpoře nediskriminačního a genderově citlivého zpravodajství. A podporovali osoby pracující v médiích a rozvíjeli a posilovali mechanismy samoregulace tak, aby se posílilo vyrovnané a nestereotypní zobrazování žen v médiích.
Ensure the availability and accessibility of programs aimed at perpetrators of violence against women with a view to preventing further violence and ensure that perpetrators are encouraged to take part in them.
Zajistili dostupnost a snadný přístup k programům určených pro pachatele a pachatelky násilí založeného na pohlaví s cílem zamezit dalšímu násilí a podporovali zapojení pachatelů a pachatelek do takových programů.
Improve the collection and dissemination of comparable, reliable, regularly updated administrative and statistical data on victims and perpetrators of all forms of gender-based violence, disaggregated by sex, age and victim-perpetrator relationship.
Zlepšili sběr a šíření srovnatelných, spolehlivých, pravidelně aktualizovaných administrativních a statistických dat o obětech, pachatelích a pachatelkách všech forem násilí založeného na pohlaví, členěných dle pohlaví, věku a vztahu mezi obětí a pachatelem či pachatelkou.
And take measures to encourage men and boys to engage in prevention of all forms of gender-based violence.
A přijali opatření podněcující muže a chlapce, aby se zapojovali do prevence všech forem násilí založeného na pohlaví.
Formulated in Prague, May 28, 2015.
V Praze 28. května 2015.
So in order to bring this conference to a closing, I'm very happy that I'm joined up here by two important people without whom and without whose support this conference could not have happened. And I would like to give the word now to first Siri Ellen Sletner, who's the Norwegian ambassador to the Czech Republic, and then to Robert Bosch, who's the director of the Open Society Fund Prague here in the Czech Republic. So, Ambassador, the word is yours.
Thank you very much. And good afternoon, everybody. I think maybe we are coming in at a moment where you're all longing for luncheon. So I'll try to keep it short, but I think I'd like to remind you about a couple of points after this two-day conference. Although I think this last call for action very good sum up what you have listened to for these 2 days and what is necessary to do after the conference. The conference is just the start. But I think that the topic is very important because it globally affects the highest number of people, domestic and gender-based violence, one of the most important human rights violations. And as you probably know or have learned during these 2 days, it not only affects the victim's physical and psychological health and family relations, but it's also a problem for the whole society, thus contributing to persisting inequalities between men and women, and it affects all countries. This is a challenge, gender-based violence. And I think this conference is important because it has invited, and we have had a lot of international experts, decision makers, service providers, and you've all had the possibility to meet here in Prague, share your experience and discuss different ways of tackling gender-based violence. We know that the problem is complex and it's necessary to focus on many activities, including prevention, protection of victims, creating and following international and national legislation and strategies, and raising public awareness. It is also very important to consider the children in this issue when it comes to domestic violence. I think yesterday you saw this Norwegian movie called Angry Man, and you also heard the story about the King of Norway, King Harald V, who engaged himself personally in this issue. That is very important because you should know that the royal family are a kind of how should I say, a role model for the society. And they have the possibility, much stronger than maybe ordinary men and women, to actually raise the awareness of very important issues, as they very often do. So I think the engagement of the king himself is very important. Lastly, I would like to stress that seen from my government, the support for fighting, or the contribution for fighting gender-based violence in Europe is very important. You probably have learned that we have established what we call the Norway grants. And this is, as Norway is an active partner of European cooperation, this is our contribution to reducing or to focus on particular issues and to see whether we can make a difference. That's why I think that this two-day conference and also this afternoon we are opening a crisis center for children who have been living in families experience the same kind of violence. Is very, very important initiative from us. But of course we could not have done it without the good support of Open Society Prague and also the European Union Agency for Fundamental Rights in Vienna and the Council of Europe. But these kind of initiatives, these kind of events, arrangements are very, very important. You should also know that this conference is just one of 30 different projects focusing on this topic. I trust and I hope that you will bring with you back to your country some experience, some knowledge, and some initiative for action, because such a conference needs a follow-up. It's not a one-time event. Thank you for participating.
And now I'll hand the microphone to Robert Basch, the director of the Open Society Prague.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I think that Her Excellency very well summarized this two-day conference, so I think I would like to add just some points. I strongly believe that these 2 days were inspirational days for you, and that you also find the dead ends, blind allies, basically the ways which not to go, which I believe is also very important. We heard yesterday from Minister Dinsby that his ministry already initiated the negotiation with Ministry of Justice regarding the Istanbul Convention, and we believe that these negotiations will be successful. We are not even at the beginning, we can say, but we believe that it will be successful, and the negotiations will be not only successful, it will, and which means that we not be only those states who simply sign, but also ratify, but also those who are going to implement the convention very effectively, which means that there will be a proper legislation, that there will be approaches, there will be education, and there will be also cooperation between different stakeholders, which I believe is one of the most important things. The conference showed and basically confirmed what we believe in and what's our conviction, that the most effective is the approach, is an integrated approach, basically politics and policies, praxis and the data, the research, and which is very important. And if we are not able to integrate all these things together, that I believe, and I mentioned this yesterday, we won't be able to achieve the change. Basically, it will be very difficult for us. So last thing, and I would like to say a couple of thanks. Definitely, I would like to thanks for the support Norwegian Embassy and Norway Grants. Without their support, we wouldn't be able to organize this event. And I would like to definitely thanks to our partners, which is Council of Europe and Fundamental Rights Agency, and also Office of the Government. I would like also very much, I would like to say very much thank you to the team who is behind the conference. I think it was very complicated at some points, a lot of last-minute declines, problems with the airport in Brussels. There was a lot of unexpected situations and a lot of improvisations. But I think that, and I believe that it won't be visible from outside, which is great. So I would like to thank especially Bara, who for her leadership, Lenka for the great program, then Vlaďka for the excellent logistics, and Hanka for great communication, and definitely all the others who were somehow support and support the conference. And definitely, last but not least, I would like to thank the steering committee who was in charge and who basically who brought very important ideas and comments to the preparation of the conference. And I would like to thank speakers and moderators, and I would like to thank all of you for the participation. And I would like to wish you nice travel back home. And I strongly believe that you will be able effectively utilize the land experience, knowledge, and contacts. So I think this is just a beginning of a beautiful friendships. Thank you very much.
And obviously, you're all invited for lunch now. I got a sign, a big sign that said lunch. So please feel invited for lunch and enjoy your lunch. Thank you.